There are questions so strange. They don't just challenge science, they disturb it. They twist beneath the surface of understanding. Like quiet earthquakes beneath polished marble. They don't raise their hands. They don't demand answers. They just wake like riddles written into the fabric of reality, unresolved, unrelenting, and unafraid of being misunderstood, somewhere in the silence between galaxies. Logic breaks. Out there, between the dying light of one star and the birth of another, is a place where numbers fall apart, and time forgets which direction to flow. A place not made of matter or even energy, but of contradiction. Paradox. And the strangest thing is, we know it's there, not because we can see it, but because it doesn't make sense. Because in all our searching, all our theories, all our symphonies of calculation and experiment, something still feels off. What if everything we know is wrong? In places we haven't looked yet? What if the universe isn't a solved puzzle, but a whisper that refuses to become a sentence? Close your eyes. Imagine the cosmos not as a place, but as a question. One so vast, so delicately impossible, that it folds reason into origami and sets it adrift on starlight. Imagine light traveling for 13 billion years just to bend slightly around the edge of a gravity, well, that shouldn't exist. Imagine a black hole, not as an object, but as a broken promise, where time slows, meaning distorts, and information once thought sacred simply vanishes. We built equations like cathedrals, towering and beautiful. We discovered the symmetries of nature, the elegance of physics, the sacred dance of cause and effect. But then came the paradoxes. Quiet revolutions disguised as questions. They didn't shout, they whispered. What happens to information in a black hole? If the universe had a beginning, what came before? If time can bend, can it also break? And the most unsettling question of all, what if there's no final answer at all, just deeper and deeper paradox? These aren't just scientific problems. They're wounds in the language of the universe. Places where ideas bleed into silence. Where certainty ends and awe begins. The scientists who study them don't sleep easily. Not because they fear monsters in the dark, but because they fear logic. Unraveling in daylight. They chase particles that shouldn't behave the way they do. They write equations that solve themselves into impossibility. They peer into telescopes and see echoes of events that, by all rights, should not have left a trace. They are not just explorers of the stars. They are cartographers of the unknown, drawing maps of a landscape made of paradox. And yet, despite the contradictions, or perhaps because of them, we keep going, we keep asking. Because at the heart of every paradox is a promise that even the impossible might one day become beautifully understood. But for now, we live in the in-dash between in a universe too large to hold in thought, too strange to hold in logic, and too exquisite to be an accident. Maybe that's why we're here, not to solve it, but to feel it. To stand beneath its vastness and whisper back. We noticed there's something unsettling about a paradox. It's not simply a riddle or a puzzle left unsolved. It's a tear in the fabric of understanding, a fracture in the mirror we've built to reflect reality. A paradox doesn't just whisper, "You don't know." It dares to suggest that what you know is wrong. In science, certainty is a fragile thing. We build truths like cathedrals, logical, symmetrical, grounded in observation, and then, from the darkness beyond our equations, a paradox appears like a crack in the dome, something that both exists and cannot exist. Something that works until you look too closely. But what exactly is a paradox? It's not merely complexity. It's contradiction. A paradox is what happens when two ideas, both supported by reason or evidence, collide in a way that shouldn't be possible. It is the moment when logic consumes itself, when the straight line curves inward and the map erases its own legend. The universe, it turns out, is full of them, from the ghostly behavior of quantum particles to the immense contradictions at the edge of black holes. From the infinite regression of time to the haunting silence of Fermi's paradox. The cosmos is not simply a place of beauty and clarity, it is a place of unrelenting contradiction. It does not always make sense, and that perhaps is what makes it so profoundly human, because we too are paradoxes, creatures of flesh and stardust, logic and longing, reason and emotion. We explore a universe that gave birth to us, with minds evolved to survive, not to comprehend. And yet we dare to comprehend anyway. So here, at the beginning of our journey, we pose a question far more dangerous than it seems. How can reality disobey its own rules? What happens when the universe forgets to make sense? And more importantly, what does that mean for us? Are paradoxes just flaws in our understanding, holes in a net we haven't finished weaving? Or do they point toward something deeper? Something fundamental. Something the human mind was never meant to grasp. These are not just intellectual curiosities. They are reminders of the boundary between knowledge and mystery. And to walk that boundary is to feel both terrified and alive. In this journey, we will not seek comfort. We will not tie every ribbon, solve every riddle, or light every dark corner. Instead, we will honor the question. We will explore the contradictions that lie at the edge of science and stare into the fog that surrounds them, not to dispel it, but to understand its shape, because within these paradoxes lies something sacred, not just the unknown, but the unknowable, the edge of language, the silence where certainty ends. We are not just chasing facts. We are confronting the limits of what we can know. And maybe, if we listen closely enough to the places where the universe stutters, we'll hear something beautiful in the brokenness, long before equations carved the bones of the cosmos, long before numbers learned to whisper to the stars. We stood on this planet, small and awestruck, staring into the dark. We didn't need telescopes to know the sky was keeping secrets. We felt it in our bones, in our myths, in the shapes of stories told around fire. Something was up there. Something bigger than sense. And even when logic was still in its infancy, paradox already had a throne. In ancient Egypt, the universe did not begin with clarity, but with contradiction. Out of chaos, the infinite sea of disorder, emerged Adam, a being who created himself. A creator born of nothing, from nothing, into nothing. It wasn't meant to be understood. It was meant to be worshipped. A paradox not as error but as sacred design. To the ancients, contradiction wasn't a mistake, it was a message. That reality, at its root, doesn't owe us coherence. It only offers itself, vast and veiled. Greek philosophers took that instinct and shaped it into thought. Zeno of Elea, a man who asked questions that outlived empires, gave us the paradox of Achilles and the tortoise. Imagine the fleet-footed warrior racing toward a tortoise given a small head start. Logically, he should overtake it. But Zeno says no, because each time Achilles reaches the point where the tortoise was, the tortoise has moved slightly forward. Again, and again, and again, an infinite loop. A chase that never ends. The mind reels, the body rebels. We know Achilles wins, we can feel it, but Zeno wasn't trying to trick us. He was showing us the cracks in what we thought was solid. That space and time, those twin pillars of perception, might not behave the way we expect when you look closely enough. And that idea that under scrutiny, even the simplest things unravel, never left us. In the East, paradox was not only a tool of philosophy, it was a doorway to awakening. Zen koans like, "What is the sound of one hand clapping?" weren't puzzles to solve, but experiences to feel. They were meant to break the mind open, to show that rational thought has edges. And beyond those edges is something more. Even our own lives are built on paradox. We crave freedom, yet seek belonging. We chase meaning, yet live in a universe that seems indifferent. We are stardust with feelings, matter that dreams. There's nothing logical about that dot, and so, it's no wonder that when science was born, it found paradox waiting. Galileo, peering through his telescope, saw the moons of Jupiter and realized the Earth was not the center. But that created a new question. Why didn't we feel the Earth move? How could it be spinning, racing through space, yet still feel still? Newton answered it, sort of, with laws that bent the universe into something calculable. But even his genius left fractures. He believed in absolute time, a clock ticking the same for all. And yet, that clock would later shatter in Einstein's hands, because Einstein too was chasing paradox. What happens when you're moving near the speed of light? Why does light always seem to move at the same speed, no matter how fast you're going? These were contradictions, breaks in logic. And they didn't signal error. They signaled something deeper. A crack in the surface of understanding through which something truer might emerge. Time, it turns out, isn't absolute. Space isn't passive, and gravity is geometry. That's not how the world feels to us. But that's what it is, paradoxes. The ones that refused to go away became the seeds of revolution. Quantum mechanics, that wild frontier of probability and uncertainty, was born from paradox. A cat that is both alive and dead. A particle that is everywhere until we look. Light that acts like a wave until it's forced to be a particle. Reality that doesn't seem to choose a shape until we ask it a question. We think of science as cold precision. But its heart beats with wonder and with contradiction. And maybe that's the most honest part of it. Paradoxes aren't dead ends. They're not mistakes in the code. They're not holes to patch, they're doorways. Doorways to deeper questions. To higher understanding, to stranger realities. Doorways to the next leap, the next theory, the next revolution. When logic breaks, it doesn't mean the world is broken. It means we're getting close. Close to something real and vast and breathtaking. So we chase paradox, not to trap it, but to follow it. Like a shadow leading us to the light, because maybe, just maybe, the universe is not a riddle to solve, but a poem to read. And every paradox is a stanza. There are places in the universe where truth fractures. Where the rules we thought were eternal bend like heat on the horizon. Where logic itself, the bedrock of science, starts to blur not from ignorance, but from contradiction. These are not just mysteries, they are paradoxes. Born not from what we don't know, but from what we do and what refuses to fit together. For over a century, we've had two great maps of reality. One, smooth as silk, elegant as an orbit. Einstein's general relativity, a theory of gravity that tells us space and time are not passive backgrounds, but living, flexible things. According to this picture, massive objects bend spacetime like stones on a trampoline, curving the paths that everything else must follow. The other, pixelated and twitching. Quantum mechanics, a universe of probabilities and uncertainty, where particles blink in and out of being, and observation itself shapes what is real. Each of these theories is profoundly successful. They've predicted the bending of starlight, the ticking of atomic clocks, the chemistry of stars, and the behavior of semiconductors. They are not guesses, they are experimentally carved pillars of truth, and yet, they hate each other. Relativity deals with the cosmos, the vast and slow. Quantum mechanics deals with the very small, the very fast, the jittering chaos beneath the surface of reality. But when you try to apply both in the heart of a black hole, or at the moment of the Big Bang, they scream. The math diverges. Space becomes both smooth and grainy. Time becomes both continuous and fragmented. Causality unravels. What one theory insists must happen, the other declares impossible. It is in this screaming match that paradox is born. Nowhere is this clash more haunting than in the black hole. A star dies, its core collapses. Gravity wins, and what's left is an object so dense, so absolute, that not even light can escape its grip. But here's the paradox. When something, a planet, a photon, a poem falls into a black hole, where does it go? According to relativity, it's gone. The information it carried, the quantum state of every particle, is swallowed beyond the event horizon, unreachable, erased from the universe. But quantum mechanics says, no, that cannot happen. Information, like energy, must be conserved. The rules demand it. The wave function must evolve, not disappear. So which is it? Does information die in the blackness, a crime against quantum law? Or does it somehow survive encoded in ghostly echoes around the black hole's surface, or perhaps smeared across the event horizon like a cosmic hologram? Stephen Hawking called it the information paradox, and it kept him awake at night. Not because the math didn't work, but because it did, and disagreed. Because the universe seemed to whisper two truths at once. And then there's time. Time, that quiet river we're all swimming in. It feels like the most solid thing we know. Seconds tick forward. Causes lead to effects. The arrow never wavers. But under extreme conditions in warped spacetime, near light speed, in rotating black holes, time begins to loop. Imagine a particle that travels in a circle through spacetime and meets its own past self. Imagine a message sent backward, arriving before it was written, or a traveler who steps out of the future and becomes the cause of their own birth. These are not just science fiction fantasies. They are allowed in theory by the equations of general relativity, and they birth paradoxes that split the mind. The grandfather paradox. You go back in time and prevent your own grandfather from meeting your grandmother, so you're never born. But then, how did you go back? The bootstrap paradox. You find a book, go back in time, and give it to a younger version of yourself. You grow up, publish the book. But who wrote it? A book with no author. A cause with no beginning. Time, eating its own tail. These are not mistakes in the math. They are features, possibilities embedded in the way spacetime curves. But they tear at the fabric of meaning. They force us to ask, is time even real, or just an illusion, built to keep us sane? Because if a particle can be its own past, if a moment can give birth to itself, then causality, the engine of logic, is not as sacred as we thought, and perhaps neither is the truth. What if space is lying to us? What if time doesn't flow but folds, branches, doubles back? What if the future, the past, and the now are not separate lanes, but a tangled web, humming all at once, waiting for perception to sort them out? We used to think paradoxes meant something was broken, a flaw in theory, a mistake in math. But what if paradox is not a sign of failure? What if it's the raw edge of understanding, the place where truth has not been smoothed over yet? The universe, after all, is not obliged to make sense, but it is obliged to exist. And sometimes, existence writes poetry with contradictions. We have always listened for answers in the silence, the kind of silence that lives between stars, the kind that stretches across time like a taut string, vibrating only with questions, not absence, but potential, not emptiness, but the breath before a word is spoken. And in that silence, a paradox rises like a flare in the void. Where is everybody? This is not just a question. It's a wound in our assumptions, a crack in the mirror of our cosmic significance. In a galaxy with more stars than seconds in our lives, in a universe swelling with possibilities, the sheer absence of voices, civilizations, signals, stories is deafening. This is the Fermi Paradox, named after physicist Enrico Fermi, who casually dropped the question at lunch one day, as if asking the obvious. If the universe is teeming with worlds, why don't we see anyone? And yet, we keep counting. The Drake equation, a poetic attempt to estimate the number of intelligent civilizations in the galaxy, dances with probabilities. The rate of star formation, the fraction of those stars with planets, The number of planets that might support life, and still silence. Maybe we are early. The first voice in a cosmic choir not yet formed. Maybe we are rare, a freak occurrence of chemistry and chance. Or perhaps we are catastrophically wrong. Wrong about life. Wrong about intelligence. Wrong about what it means to exist at all. Because maybe, in our definitions, we have created a prison. We look for life as we know it, not life as it might be. We search for messages like ours, not signals shaped by minds we cannot fathom. The paradox isn't that they're not there. The paradox is that we still expect them to be like us. And so the telescope becomes a mirror. In the void, we find ourselves staring back. But this is only the beginning, because paradox is not confined to space. It permeates the fabric of reality itself. In the quantum world, the domain beneath perception logic begins to fray. Here, a particle is both here and there. It moves without traveling. It exists without being. Enter the quantum observer paradox. It begins with a cat, a strange hypothetical cat. Schrödinger's cat, neither alive nor dead until observed. Not metaphor, but metaphorical truth. A symbol of quantum superposition, that things can be in multiple states simultaneously. Until measured. In the double-slit experiment, particles like electrons pass through two slits in a barrier. When unobserved, they behave like waves, interfering with themselves as if each particle takes all paths at once. But observe them, and they choose a path. The wave collapses. The interference vanishes. Observation alters reality. But what does it mean to observe? Are we shaping the universe just by looking at it? Or more hauntingly, does the universe split with every choice? A multiverse branching endlessly, each reality containing one possibility, one version of the truth, and one you. If so, then every decision we make echoes across countless worlds. And paradox isn't a bug. It's the engine of infinity. And yet, the paradox deepens. Because if reality splits, what binds it? If consciousness collapses the wave function, what is consciousness? A chemical accident, a quantum participant, or the cosmos contemplating itself? But even consciousness, vast, mysterious, luminous, meets its shadow, the paradox of heat, death. In the distant future, the universe trends toward entropy. Stars burn out, galaxies drift apart. The cosmos, once vibrant with fire and formation, cools into silence. No light, no heat, no structure. Just uniformity, equilibrium, the stillness after the storm. And yet, in that ending a paradox blooms. If everything ends, what becomes of thought? What becomes of the minds that wondered? The dreams that reached across time? What becomes of the question itself? Can thought survive when there's nothing left to think about? Or does the very act of wondering transcend the end? Maybe the universe dies, but the echo of the question, why, outlives the stars, because perhaps asking is more eternal than answering. Perhaps consciousness is not an anomaly within the universe, but a signal from it, a whisper back to itself. I am. So where do we go from here? Scientists, dreamers in lab coats have not surrendered to the strangeness. They've leaned into it. Some propose that the universe is a hologram, that three-dimensional space is an illusion projected from a two-dimensional surface at the edge of reality, that gravity itself is emergent, not fundamental, but born from the entropy of information. Others seek a theory of everything, a union of quantum mechanics and general relativity, a bridge between the smooth and the granular. In these efforts, paradox is not a nuisance. It is a signpost, a flicker of something deeper. The multiverse, once science fiction, now sits at the edge of serious discourse. A reality not singular, but plural. Not one book, but an infinite library, each page a universe, each possibility played out somewhere. And what of quantum gravity? A framework that might finally resolve the singularities that break our equations, the cores of black holes, the birth of the Big Bang where the known laws dissolve. In these questions, paradox is the compass, because science does not fear paradox. It grows because of it. Like a tree breaking through concrete, truth forces itself upward through contradiction. We build new physics not by avoiding paradoxes, but by following them. The stars do not give up their secrets easily. Reality resists simplicity. But in its resistance, we find something sacred. Paradoxes are not obstacles. They are invitations. To think differently, to feel more deeply, to step beyond what is comfortable and wander into what is true. Every contradiction is a door, and behind that door possibility. Not answers. Not yet, but the thrill of not knowing. And in that thrill, we are made more human. We are not lost. We are searching. And maybe that's the point. Let the paradoxes remain. Let the silence speak. Let the universe be stranger than we ever imagined. Because in that strangeness, we find the echo of our own unfinished story. Still unfolding. Still questioning. Still reaching. And the most beautiful paradox of all is that we may never reach the end. But still we journey. We used to think the sky ended somewhere, that if we climbed the tallest mountain, or flew the swiftest bird, we might find the edge of it perhaps stitched with stars, or guarded by gods. But we were wrong. There is no edge, no ceiling, no map with a folded corner that says, here it ends. Instead, the farther we look, the more we realize we are adrift in a sea, whose shores retreat as we chase them. From this tiny rock, this trembling dot called Earth, we've peered outward with minds far larger than the skulls that house them. And what we've seen is not comfort, not closure, but silence, immensity, mystery. Not answers, but outlines of questions too large to name. In every direction, we find paradox. Shadows where knowledge should be. Whispers where reality should scream. Dark matter, dark energy. Together, they make up 95% of the universe, and yet we've never touched them, never seen them, never heard their voice. They are the puppeteers behind galaxies, bending light, sculpting space, choreographing the cosmic ballet. And yet they remain invisible, undetectable, perhaps even unknowable. How can most of everything be made of nothing we understand? We gave them names dark, not because of color, but because of ignorance. We trace their fingers by watching the stars they pull. We map their footprints by observing galaxies they cradle. But it is like trying to understand the wind by watching the sway of trees. We feel their gravity, but we do not grasp their truth. Then, there is the inflation paradox, a contradiction baked into the birth of everything. The early universe expanded faster than the speed of light. Not a single particle traveling, but space itself stretching, ballooning outward with such fevered urgency that it outran causality. Regions that were never in contact somehow ended up in thermal agreement. A uniform temperature painted across the heavens like a single breath, from a mouth that had not yet formed. How? We don't know. It should be impossible. But the evidence is etched into the very fabric of space, like a birthmark the cosmos forgot to hide. These are not just technical gaps in our understanding. They are fractures in logic. They are holes in the blueprint of reality. They are truths that refuse to behave. The more we learn, the more we unlearn the shape of certainty. Each discovery is a candle, yes, but each candle casts new shadows. And in those shadows we find more paradoxes waiting. Not as traps, but as invitations, because maybe the universe doesn't fear contradiction. Maybe contradiction is how it breathes. The great irony of cosmology is that the further we zoom out, the more personal it becomes. We look across billions of light years, at webs of galaxies spun like silk, at voids so vast they dwarf imagination, and somehow, we end up looking inward. We realize that we are stitched into the riddle. We are not just observers of the cosmos. We are questions walking through stars, each of us a brief flicker of thought, wrapped in bone and breath, yet carrying inside us the same atoms forged in the bellies of ancient suns, the same patterns, the same laws, the same longing. We are the universe, asking itself what it is, and paradox is the echo that comes back when the universe listens. So much of what we've built, our equations, our models, our simulations, are attempts to carve certainty into the unknown. But sometimes, the unknown resists. It dances instead. It folds itself into contradictions, into impossibilities that somehow still happen. And perhaps that's not a flaw. Perhaps paradox is not the end of understanding. Perhaps it is its beginning. The paradoxes we face in the cosmos are not glitches. They are signatures, proof that reality is deeper than our language. For it, that behind every theory, there's a deeper mystery, and behind that, perhaps, a silence so vast it becomes music. The universe does not scream. It hums. It sings in gravity wells and quantum flutters. It speaks in equations written across the sky. And it hides its punchlines inside the very questions we thought would answer it. There's no final page. No last chapter. Just a deeper page. And a deeper ink. So we zoom out from the scale of cells to stars, from planets to clusters, from the Milky Way to filaments of galaxies that look like neurons in the mind of something we can't name. And we begin to feel it, that perhaps we are inside a thought, that perhaps the universe is not just a stage, but a poem, and we fleeting, fragile, wondering are the punctuation. There's a quiet ache that comes with not knowing, not the simple kind, like misplacing your keys or forgetting a name, but the deeper one. The ache that lives in the chest of every thinking creature. The ache of standing before a question that has no answer. Paradox doesn't just challenge our theories. It challenges our souls. It asks us to hold two truths that cannot both be true and believe them anyway. It invites us into spaces where logic frays, where reason falters, where the universe seems to shrug at our need for resolution. And yet, we return to these questions, again and again, like moths circling a flame they know will never warm them, because deep down we are not just thinkers, we are feelers. We are builders of meaning. And paradox, though it burns, gives shape to that fire. We are beings of order, looking up at a chaotic sky. We evolved in a world of rhythms, sunrise and sunset, heartbeat and breath. We crave patterns. We seek symmetry. We ache for closure. And when the universe denies us that, when it offers instead the mystery of black holes, the contradiction of time loops, the silence after asking, are we alone? Something ancient stirs inside us. Fear, yes, but also awe, loneliness, and longing. To encounter a paradox is to be reminded that we are not in control, that the cosmos does not bend for our comfort, that reality is not obligated to be comprehensible, but it's also a reminder of something more beautiful, that we are capable of wrestling with impossibility. To find something unknowable and stare into it anyway. That's not madness. That's meeting these great contradictions. Quantum cats, both alive and dead. Information that seems to vanish into the jaws of black holes. The question of what it means to observe. They are not just scientific curiosities. They are mirrors. They reflect back our own contradictions. We are temporary, but we search for eternity. We are made of atoms, but we dream in poetry. We live knowing we will die, and yet we fall in love. Raise children, write symphonies, paint stars on ceilings, and whisper to the night sky as if it might whisper back. The paradoxes of the universe echo the paradoxes of the heart. What is death, if not the black hole of consciousness? What is identity, if not a superposition, a person both known and unknowable, ever changing, ever collapsing into new versions of themselves? What is purpose, if not the deepest question with no guaranteed answer? And still, we ask. Still, we build telescopes to chase light that left its home before Earth had oceans. Still, we write equations that dare to sketch the infinite. Still, we weep in museums and fall silent beneath full moons. Because even when there are no answers, the asking itself becomes sacred. That's the strange gift of paradox. It doesn't just unsettle. It transforms. It breaks us open. Not to destroy us, but to remind us that we are more than logic machines. We are not defined by what we solve. We are defined by what we seek. A paradox is not a wall. It's a door without a handle. You cannot break through it with force. You must lean into it with wonder. You must let it hurt. Let it whisper that perhaps meaning isn't found in resolution, but in the willingness to live without one. There's a strange kind of courage in that. To exist in a universe that doesn't owe us clarity. To know that the cosmos may never make itself plain, and to love it anyway. We are brief sparks in a dark ocean. We are notes in a song that began before language, before atoms, before time. We may never know the full melody, but we can hum along. And in doing so, in wondering, in aching, in asking impossible questions, we become part of something infinite. Maybe paradox hurts because it shows us our limits. Maybe it heals because it reminds us that we are still growing, still reaching, still worthy of the stars. There are places in thought where even thought begins to tremble. Edges where the rules we thought were carved in cosmic stone begin to blur like ink in water. Where logic doesn't collapse, but bends gracefully, disturbingly, and with a strange beauty that defies certainty. In these borderlands of physics and philosophy, we find ideas too wild for textbooks, yet too persistent to ignore, and maybe, just maybe, too important to dismiss. What if the universe is not the foundation, but the facade? What if everything, time, space, particles, even consciousness, is running on something deeper? The simulation hypothesis whispers this possibility, that reality is not fundamental, but rendered, that atoms are pixels, that physical laws are lines of code. That paradoxes, those strange and haunting contradictions we keep stumbling into, are not glitches in nature, but bugs in the program. Like a game too vast for its own rules, we reach for the Planck length, the smallest possible scale, and find a kind of resolution limit, as if reality itself can't zoom in forever. Like a digital image, there's a smallest pixel, a final granule, a stopping point to smoothness. We discover quantum entanglement particles communicating instantly across impossible distances, and wonder, is the universe running on non-local shortcuts, like optimized code? We find constants that are eerily fine-tuned, as if the simulation were balanced just so that stars could burn, atoms could cling, and life could briefly bloom. Are we in a story written not by nature, but by something else? If so, who is the author? And is the code still running or beginning to break? These are not just metaphors for mystery. They are serious questions asked in the halls of physics departments and cosmology conferences. Not because we want them to be true, but because the strange behavior of reality sometimes makes more sense if we aren't real. Then comes a darker, lonelier paradox whispered from the edge of entropy itself. The Boltzmann Brain. It asks, chillingly, what is more likely? That an entire universe with galaxies, planets, oceans, and minds emerged in perfect order from the chaos of randomness? Or that a single thinking entity, a mind, a brain, a flickering awareness spontaneously blinked into existence amid the noise? Statistically, terrifyingly, the second might be more probable. In an infinite chaos, the random assembly of a single conscious moment requires far less organization than the birth of an entire universe. So the question comes knocking, are you the anomaly? Is this all a hallucination, not from biology, but from physics? Are you a Boltzmann brain, a brief flicker of self-awareness floating in disorder, dreaming a life, a world, a cosmos that never existed? We recoil from the idea, not because we can disprove it, but because it dissolves everything: memory, meaning, time itself, and yet even the fear is part of the dream, even the doubt is data. Then from the horizon of imagination comes another theory that multiplies mystery instead of reducing it. The multiverse data universe. Not alone, but surrounded. Maybe our cosmos is one of countless others, some with different laws of physics, others nearly identical, down to the placement of every grain of dust. In this view, every paradox isn't a puzzle, but a possibility. Every contradiction happens somewhere. There's a universe where you never read these words, another where you wrote them, one where physics makes perfect sense, and one where it doesn't care to dot in an infinite multiverse. Nothing is impossible, only improbable. And improbability, given eternity, becomes certainty. But this raises a deeper question. If everything happens, what matters? If every version of you exists somewhere, what does it mean to be this one? Maybe meaning isn't found in uniqueness, but in awareness, not in knowing that you are here now. That this moment is not just one among billions, but yours. A fragile bubble of nowness, floating in a sea of elsewheres. We are trying to read a book written in a language we don't fully understand. And yet we feel it speak to us in glimpses, in dreams, in paradoxes that aren't mistakes, but metaphors because even when the rules break down, something remains. The longing, the reaching, the strange, stubborn fire that refuses to stop wondering. Maybe that is the true constant. Not gravity, not light, but curiosity, this ancient gravity of the soul that pulls us toward mystery, toward the edge of knowledge, and then one step further. And maybe that's where truth begins, not in answers, but in the courage to ask impossible questions and love them, even when they don't love us back. There comes a moment, not in equations, not in telescopes, but in us, where all the questions we've asked begin to echo differently, not as puzzles to be solved. But as songs to be heard. For so long, we've treated paradox as a threat, as the enemy of knowledge, as the jagged edge of reason where things stop making sense. But perhaps we were wrong. Perhaps paradox is not failure. It is the signature of something bigger than knowledge, a shimmer at the boundary of understanding, a rippling in the surface of the known, hinting at a deeper current below. What breaks logic might be the seed of a deeper truth. We've built cathedrals of reason, with pillars of mathematics, arches of physics, stained glass windows made of light and probability. And yet, in every sacred hall, there is a crack, a paradox. Quiet, beautiful, unresolvable, the Fermi Paradox. The heat-death of consciousness, the mystery of measurement, the riddle of time, of space, of self. Each one is a mirror, but the reflection it returns is not always ours. Sometimes, it stares back. In silence. Sometimes, it opens a door, because the mind that discovers paradox is not broken. It is expanding. It is touching the outline of a vaster shape that language cannot hold. The point was never to win the riddle. It was to enter it. To let it change us. To let it humble us. You see, we have always been surrounded by mystery. From the heartbeat of a neutrino to the unfurling of a galaxy. From the dreams of a child to the entropy of stars. And yet, here we are dreaming of answers. Searching for patterns in a sky that owes us nothing. Listening for voices across the vacuum. Why? Why does a species, fragile and finite, dare to ask questions the universe itself may never answer? Maybe because we are not separate from the mystery. We are made of it. Every neuron, every tear, every laugh, every breath stitched together from particles forged in paradox. Born from stars we'll never touch, pulled by gravity we cannot see, moved by hopes we cannot measure. You are not lost in this mystery. You are the mystery. Question that learned to ask itself. A flicker of awareness within the grand recursion of the cosmos, not despite its contradictions, but because of them, maybe. That's what makes us human. Not our ability to solve, but our refusal to stop wondering. Not our conquests of knowledge, but our reverence for the unknowable. We speak so often of truth as if it's a prize, a final revelation. But what if truth is not a destination, but a motion, a tide, a pull toward something forever, just beyond the reach of fingers and formulas? What if the universe is not here to be decoded? What if it's here to be felt? The cold silence between galaxies, the soft hum of hydrogen, the loneliness of space, and the courage to keep reaching across it anyway. There is something sacred in that reach. Something that no paradox can undo. Because in the end, we are not here to solve everything. We are here to wonder. To let awe stretch. The mind like gravity stretches time. To let the beauty of not knowing be as essential as the beauty of knowing. To realize that maybe the point isn't to close the question. But to keep asking it. Forever. Every era believed it stood on the brink of understanding, that the mystery was almost behind us. And every era was wrong. We are not at the end of science. We are at the edge of its beginning. And what an edge it is, trembling with quantum uncertainty, brushed by the breath of black holes, folded into dimensions we cannot visualize. Time may be an illusion. Space may be emergent. Consciousness may be a ripple in something even stranger. Yet still we press our hands to the glass. Still we whisper into the dark. Still we ask, why? And in the asking, not the answer, we find the thread that binds us to the stars. So if you ever feel small beneath the sky, if you ever feel overwhelmed by the scale of all you don't know, remember, you are not less because of the questions. You are more because you can carry them, because you can sing them, because you can sit with paradox and let it be your companion instead of your cage. The universe does not owe us understanding, but it has given us something even stranger. It has given us the hunger to understand. And that hunger, that sacred ache, may be the truest thing we know. So let it ache. Let it burn. Let it lead you always to the edge. And when you stand there, heart open, mind wide, beneath the starless questions that refuse to close, know this. That is where wonder lives. And it was never meant to end. This was not an explanation. It was a mirror. And through that mirror, you've walked quietly, curiously through landscapes, made not of soil and stone, but of contradictions, paradoxes, riddles without keys. And yet, you didn't turn away. You stayed, even when it hurt to imagine, even when logic frayed at the edges and the universe folded in on itself like an unsolvable thought. You stayed, and there's something brave about that, because it is easier always to crave closure, to crave neat answers folded tightly into facts, tucked safely away in textbooks. But the universe, this strange humming thing we live inside, is not tidy. It is wild. It is wound around itself, and in its most honest moments, it contradicts. It invites us to a place where questions do not end in periods, but in ellipses. A place where knowledge curves inward, like gravity, pulling us not toward certainty, but toward wonder. So tonight, when you look up, don't ask, why is it like this? Ask, what else could it be? Because that's the whisper hiding beneath every paradox, a quiet invitation, not to retreat from the unknown. But to lean in. To trace the outline of a mystery, not with the expectation of solving it, but with the reverence of one who finally sees its shape. We are not here to finish the puzzle. We are here to feel its weight. To carry it through time, through culture, through generations, as others before us did, as others after us will. Each of us a link in the unbroken chain of wonder. Each of us a flicker of uncertainty, trying to light the dark. And maybe that's the closest thing we'll ever get to an answer. Not a solution, but a song, a soft echo, passed between minds, between centuries, a feeling that we are not alone in our confusion. Because in the end, the paradoxes we fear are not flaws in the design, they are the design, the seams of a much larger garment, the fingerprints of truths too large to fit inside human logic. And the beauty of that? It means we were never meant to master the universe. We were meant to marvel at it, to witness, to hold the tension between knowing and not knowing, and call that tension sacred, to be the space where contradiction doesn't collapse, but coexists, is a kind of wisdom in not rushing the ending, in letting the question breathe, in realizing that maybe the question is the point, that the act of asking sincerely, vulnerably, endlessly is what makes us cosmic. And that's the real paradox, isn't it? That something so small, so brief, so human, could even dare to ask such impossible things. But we do. And that, too, is beautiful, because you, with your fragile bones and fleeting thoughts, are not just a witness to the cosmos. You are the cosmos. Thinking, wondering, looping through paradox after paradox, not as an outsider, but as a participant. As the question, and the questioner. As the riddle, and the reader. You are not in the universe. You are the universe. Trying to make sense of itself, one impossible paradox at a time.